individualism, for me, is not the way it's set up in this society, some sort of antithesis to the government. I think an immense con has been pulled on the American people. And the con works like this. You know what's bad and what's dangerous and threatens you? It's the government. The government's going to come in and tell you what to do. The government's going to run your life. The government's the problem. There really is no other way to explain the following in American politics. Large numbers of people lose their homes in a downturn, like the so-called Great Recession of 2008. Who do they blame? The government. Large numbers of people go unemployed. And what is the media all about? The government. If I were a capitalist, I'd love this. I kick the workers by throwing them out of their home, and they don't get angry at me. They get angry at the government. I fire large numbers of people. I have no responsibility for what happens to them as a result of having no job and no income. And they get angry at the senator. I'm laughing all the way to the bank. This is a genius stroke.
In theory, but if you look at government, because you said accountability, and the capitalist system has no accountability. There's some pushback I give on the accountability. I think there is some accountability. We can discuss in a Hegelian way there's more accountability for. I would say that in theory, government is perfectly accountable. That's the whole point of a democratic system, is you vote people in. In practice, there's a giant growing bureaucracy that is accountable only on the surface. There's two parties that seem to be are the same. Media is somehow integrated into making the same two parties that are just wearing different colored shirts to seem like they're very opposed and are arguing and bitterly arguing, calling each other's spouses nasty names and all those kinds of things. Okay, but that's government. So who exactly is worse here? I agree. Government or companies?
Well, why are we asking that question? Well, these are twins. Look, what you were able to say about Republicans and Democrats just now, with which I agree.
Yeah.
I would say the same thing about corporations and the government. This is the same people, literally.
But let's go to Churchill. Which one is worse? Let's go to Churchill. Like, democracy is the worst form of government, except all the other ones or whatever. So this kind of same idea. Which one exactly is worse? Because to me, it seems like
which one between what and what?
Government and industry and companies. It's because government is plagued by. I would call it corruption, because the corruption of bureaucratic paperwork, and then but they're not accountable. There doesn't seem to be a serious accountability.
Again, we're not living on the same planet.
Okay.
The greatest practitioners of central planning are corporations. Elon has an operation like General Motors, Ford, IBM, or any of the other megacorps. They have to plan. They buy up companies because they don't want to deal in the market. They don't want the insecurity, the uncertainty of having to buy their inputs or sell their outputs to somebody they don't control. They want the professor to teach the genius of a market. They hate the market. And when they grow to be big, they keep buying whoever they were dealing with before so they could better control them, which requires them then to plan the production and distribution of goods inside rather than buying them in the market. The model of the government is the private corporation. I have spent my life, give you an example, in American universities, big ones, famous ones, not just as a student, but as a professor. I mean, I've been a half a dozen schools. I teach now at the new school here. It's another one, right? Mm-hmm. They all model themselves after businesses. They model you can attack the bureaucracy of universities, good reason, it's a mess, but they're proudly modeling themselves on organizing their bureaucracy in a business-like manner. So you're looking at a difference which isn't there. The government and the private sector are partners, and both of them wouldn't have it any other way. The corporations want that from the government, and the government now knows that to please the corporations is the number one objective they have, because that's how they keep their jobs and keep their system going. And so, for all practical purposes, this is the same people.
But there's important differences that I don't know if they're fundamental or just a consequence of history. But if you have government, they're accountable in a different way than companies. Companies are accountable by, especially if you have a consumer, they're accountable by sort of the consumer spending or not spending their money on whatever the heck the company is selling.
Right.
The government is accountable by votes. And it seems like government, unlike companies, for most of companies' history, is always too big to fail, meaning it can always just print money. It can always save itself. And that creates a bureaucracy. You rarely pay the cost of having made bad decisions if you're in government. You distribute the blame, and it's very unclear who's responsible for bad decisions. So bad decisions in government accumulate. So you become more and more and more inefficient and more poor in your decision making in terms of, you said public transit. Should we build a public transit system in this city or not? That's a difficult decision. That's an interesting decision. I would say it's very often a very good decision. But whoever makes that decision should be accountable for a good or bad decision. And it seems like companies are more accountable. They feel the pain of having made a bad decision more because it can go bankrupt. There's much more day-to-day pressure to make good engineering decisions. Government doesn't seem to be under the same level of pressure. Do you disagree with that?
I disagree with that. Everything in my history pushes me.
I may be living in a different
who knows?
A planet.
Who knows?
or taking a different sort of drug.
I won't mention the name, but I personally had a lot to do with a very large company here in the United States, here in the New York area. And it involved two brothers and a family who built it up into a huge corporation. One of the brothers was kind of the dynamo of the family, and he was more responsible than anybody else building it up. But he took care of his brothers. He had a nice feeling about his brothers. So the one brother who could not, without help, tie his shoes, became a vice president, got an enormous salary, got a beautiful office in a skyscraper, not that many blocks from where I'm sitting right now. And that was the way that family handled that company. And all of his relatives were somewhere in this company doing a variety of whatever. And my experience with this, and because I went to the schools I told you, all my experiences with that group of people, corporate exec, full of those stories. They made mistake after mistake, which they would tell you about. Didn't undermine they were always able to blame somebody else, something else that scraped them through. And had they not been able to, they would have been replaced by another person who did the same thing for as long as they could. And they knew it. They would talk about it at family events. That's how I know.
Yeah, I
understand that you want the outside world to look at it this way, but it's not my experience.
Interesting. But again, what's that kind of thing, at the risk of saying human nature again, yeah. I wonder what kind of system allows for that more versus less. This is the question I would call that, let's put that under the umbrella term of corruption.
Okay.
Which system allows for more corruption?
But remember that the way I define the different system is not more or less government. It's more or less allowing a democratic workplace.
Yeah.
Reconfiguring it. What happens when everybody has a vote? When you have to explain what the strategies are, what the alternatives are to a larger number of people than a board of directors or major shareholders or whoever it is that most companies are responsible to. And now you've got a whole different universe. It's not a small group of people, can't be hidden the way it's normally hidden, most of it, and on and on and on. This is, worker co-ops is what this is called in many parts of the world. So it's not that I'm advocating something that's never been seen before, not at all. The Marxism I understand is to pick from historical precedents the things that we think will work better. And I think if all the people in an enterprise, just to drive the point home, democratically decided, they would never give 2 or 3 individuals $100 million while everybody else can't send their kid to college. I mean, they're not going to do that.